Our political landscape is dominated by two parties trying to impose their version of happy, with the mindset of if they could only see it my way. They both claim to be virtuous and warn of the harms by the other party. They have effectively convinced their bases to believe that, but are they just virtue signaling, and is there such a thing as red sheep and blue sheep? Virtue signaling. We see it all the time. It's even more rampant in the hyper-opinionated world of social media. People arguing back and forth over whose political views are better, which religion is more correct, or even which generation is best. On that note, we all know it's a Xenials, argument over. But in these attempts to assert our opinions of superiority on others, we tend to paint those opinions as black or white. But we're living in a truly technicolor world. The only unwavering principle should be that of individual liberty, because this preserves those colorful beliefs. It's absolutely fine for people to believe what they want and to live by the principles they deem necessary, which was encouraged by our Declaration of Independence and protected by our Constitution. But under no condition should anyone's principles or lifestyle be imposed on others. It's these broad opinions packaged in democratic or Republican principles that are broadcasted as a sense of superior moral and ethical standards. It is this dichotomy and the unfettered endeavor to vilify each other's foundation that undermines their own tenets. When these deviations from their own principles are brought to their attention, the mental gymnastics ensue. We see this in both parties in their rah-rah proclamation of patriotism, and then turning to support their brand of authoritarianism. The irony is lost. It cannot be said enough. But the Republicans and Democrats both usher in controls antithetical to the founding of this nation. The Republicans just recently showed their inner communist control in Texas, when Governor Greg Abbott signed an executive order forbidding private companies to implement whatever safety prerogatives they seem fit to be required of their employees, regardless of the normal conservative effort to restrict government intrusion on business. It is important to note that mandates by the government and a company's policies, no matter how parallel, are not mutually exclusive, and the latter does not conflict with any infringements set within the Constitution. In fact, the right of a company to set standards in effort to protect the safety of its employees are protected. And it's this emotional rally cry of the Republican Party and its insincere righteousness towards individual liberty that they are willing to usurp those same individual liberties of private enterprise. And it's all because of virtue signaling. The Democrats are no better. In a party that supports a non-drug test posture for the acquisition of government assistance, they advocate the need for vaccine passports in order to utilize government facilities and services, regardless of an individual's right to personal choice. But it's this personal choice that is normally vital to the progressives' platform. The hypocrisy is profound, and the principles of sanctity of life and quality of life are interchangeable by both parties, depending on the scenario, paving way for wavering principles. Quality of life supersedes that sanctity of life when it comes to choice of vaccines, mask usage, or abortion, even though government vaccine mandates and abortion bans provide for that sanctity of life, each picking and choosing how and when personal liberty should be implemented, using cognitive distortion. I use the COVID pandemic to show the frenzied, hypocritical nature of each party, both claiming their aberration of principle on a righteous, conceited notion that they know what's best for all. In truth, the COVID pandemic is a dangerous reality, and I've gone in depth in a previous installment that I'll post the link to at the end of this video. But in short, vaccines have proven effective, and I highly encourage those to get it if they haven't. But we have our right to whatever health measures we choose for ourselves. Only you and your primary medical physician should make those choices. Not what you saw from Uncle Conspiracy on Facebook, or what you may have heard from Dr. No Credentials on YouTube. Cancel culture is another shining example of the duopoly's hypocritical virtue signaling. It is normally tightly associated with the left, but the right has no problem with it either. We've seen this recently with Dave Chappelle and his Netflix special. The left, a vocal advocate for freedom of speech, has no problem admonishing the context of comedy based on unfavorable remarks. There was no incitement of violence, nor call to action against any certain groups. The right's version of cancel culture is a bit more subtle, but no less emotional. When former President Obama was greenlit for a Netflix series, large swaths of deep-rooted Republicans canceled their subscriptions. They literally canceled it, yet don't claim cancel culture. But what if I told you that virtue signaling towards cancel culture is completely unfounded? Freedom of speech should absolutely be protected from government restriction. Free speech does not mean you're absolved from the consequences of that discourse. Hateful, bigoted, and derogatory speech should be exposed, and the actions of others in response to that speech, like canceling it, or the call for the termination of a position, is well within their right. It's also under this premise of free speech that Republicans pivot their angst towards social media platforms. Under the guise of free speech, they wish to have these private companies that require labor and property to be freely provided to them without consequence of actions. This delegated use of services, labor, and property is the same argument Democrats point towards for free healthcare, both advocating for what they consider a basic human right and supporting the use of government oversight to implement their position, but disregarding completely that same argument when proposed by the opposing party. It's this virtue signaling that emboldens a party's position, but still allows the blind ignorance when imposing its own infringements against private citizens, so long as it aligns with the current emotional battle banner. The duopoly has no problem ushering in their brand of authoritarianism, whether it's the diet freedom of the right or the quasi-liberties of the left. Individual liberties are individual liberties. Ignoring this under the guise of superior principles is still a suppression of personal freedom. Our disagreement does not grant power for the government to impose our will over the will of others. If one has to use mental gymnastics to explain their brand of authority, and then use party talking points to exemplify the virtue signaling that validates that authority, then yes, there is such thing as blue sheep and red sheep. Only the principle of freedom, above all others, contributes to a free society. When our principles are imposed in which the end justifies the means, well, it undercuts the concept of a free society. No matter the virtuous intent, liberty can never be imposed through force, but recognition of differences, cooperation, and compromise in maintaining those liberties will always result in a fair treatment for all.